My name is Frank Dalton. I'm 64 years old, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant who spent 3 decades barking orders, fixing broken equipment in desert heat, and learning how to keep my head clear when everything else was falling apart. These days, I live quieter. Alone on 100 acres of Arizona ranch land my father carved out of mesquite and dust after the war. My wife, Linda, passed 5 years ago, and I keep the place the way she liked it. Fence lines straight, porch swept, ledger books neat. The ranch is more than property. It's memory, blood, and bone. 2 days before Thanksgiving, a brown envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled in block letters. I thought maybe it was a holiday card from an old unit buddy until I slid the papers out. At the top, bold letters read, "Warranty Deed." The document claimed I had signed the ranch over, every acre, every shed, every corral, to my son-in-law, Derek Mullins. My stomach tightened. My signature was there at the bottom, neat as you please, except it wasn't mine. The loops on the D were wrong. The ink looked scanned, not pressed into paper. Whoever had forged it knew enough to make it pass at first glance, but not enough to fool the man whose hand had written his name on enlistment forms, mortgage contracts, and letters home from Vietnam. I set the paper on the kitchen table and stared until the words blurred. 40 years of sweat and sacrifice reduced to a fake deed stuffed in an envelope. Derek, my daughter's husband, a smooth-talking man with big schemes and bigger debts. He'd always eyed this land like it was a prize waiting for him. Now, apparently, he thought it was his. The late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen blinds, striping the paper with shadows. I heard the wind push against the old porch screen. Something inside me shifted, the same hard edge I'd carried through ambushes overseas. Whoever had done this thought I was too old, too tired, maybe too lonely to fight back. I folded the deed carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and locked it in my desk drawer. My pulse was steady, but my jaw ached from grinding my teeth. Thanksgiving dinner was in 2 days. The whole family would be here. And one way or another, I was going to find out just how far Derek planned to take this lie. The paper sat in the drawer like a live grenade, and I knew sooner or later someone was going to pull the pin. Thanksgiving came gray and windy, the kind of Arizona day when dust hangs in the air and everything tastes faintly of grit. My daughter, Marlene, insisted on hosting at my ranch like always. She said it kept family roots strong, though lately it felt more like she wanted to keep Derek close to the land. Relatives crowded the long table, turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, the whole picture. Laughter bounced off the kitchen walls. I kept quiet, carving meat with the precision the Corps had drilled into me, watching Derek across the table. He wore a tailored sport coat, like he was attending a business conference, not a family meal. His smile never reached his eyes. Halfway through dessert, he set his fork down with a clink. "Well," he said loudly enough to hush the room, "this may be our last Thanksgiving here." Conversations froze. Marlene's fork hovered in midair. I looked up slowly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Derek smirked. "Just that change is coming. This ranch isn't exactly yours alone anymore." He let the words hang, savoring them the way a man enjoys expensive bourbon. My daughter shifted uncomfortably. "Derek," she began, but he raised a hand. "Don't worry, honey. It's better for everyone this way. Fresh management, fresh vision, like passing the torch." Every eye turned toward me. I felt the old steel rise in my spine. He wanted me rattled, humiliated in front of kin. Instead, I laid my knife down gently, folded my napkin, and stood. The room stayed silent except for the rattle of the heater. "You enjoy running your mouth, Derek," I said, voice low but sharp. "But you forget something important." He leaned back, confident, daring me to continue. I let the pause stretch, then smiled without warmth. "This is just the beginning." Derek chuckled like he'd already won, but the flicker in his eyes told me he wasn't sure what I had tucked away. And that uncertainty was the wedge I needed. After the guests left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I found Derek in the garage. He had slipped away from the chatter inside, leaning against my tool bench like he owned it, scrolling his phone with a smirk. The smell of motor oil and sawdust wrapped the air. "We need to talk," I said, shutting the door behind me. He looked up, unfazed. "About what, Frank? The future?" I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket, slid the forged deed onto the bench between us. "About this." His eyes flicked to the paper, then back to me. No surprise, no denial, just a lazy grin. "You found it sooner than I expected." "Cut the games. Where'd you get this? Who signed my name?" Derek tapped the page with one finger. "Does it matter? Look at it. County stamp, notarized signature. To the world, it's as real as rain." I stepped closer. "You think I'll roll over because you waved paper in my face? This ranch has been mine since before you were born." He shrugged, pocketing his phone. "Times change. You're slowing down, Frank. Land this size needs someone younger, someone with vision. Marlene and I could make something of it. Develop, subdivide, sell lots. Real money. Marlene doesn't know a damn thing about this, does she?" His grin thinned. "She'll understand when it's done. Family's about moving forward, not clinging to the past." The words hit like shrapnel. Linda's rose garden out front, the barn I'd built with my father, the headstone under the mesquite tree. He called all that the past. I leaned on the bench, eyes level with his. "You forged my name, Derek. That's a felony. You ready to sit in front of a judge and explain?" He chuckled, but his throat tightened. "Prove it, old man." The silence stretched, heavy as desert heat. My hand rested on the deed, his fingers still tapping. Finally, I asked the question that made his smirk falter. "Who's helping you?" Derek's jaw flexed, but he didn't answer. Proof enough that I wasn't fighting him alone. Saturday morning, the desert sky was hard blue, the kind that made every line of the mountains cut sharp against the horizon. I brewed black coffee and stepped onto the porch, trying to settle my thoughts. That's when I noticed something off beyond the pasture. A sign staked crooked near the road. "For sale, prime acreage." My acreage. I felt the mug heat burn into my palm. Somebody had planted that sign while I slept in my own bed. Before I could march down there, a truck rolled up the gravel drive. Jack McCleary climbed out, broad-shouldered, hair silver like mine, a limp in his step from shrapnel we both carried back from 72. We'd served together in the Corps, stayed friends through deployments, funerals, and busted marriages. "Frank," he said, pointing to the sign, "you seeing this?" "Yeah, I'm seeing it." Jack shook his head. "Drove by on my way to town. Figured it had to be a mistake. But I saw Derek standing there yesterday afternoon with some slick-looking fellow in a suit. They were pacing off your north field like surveyors." I ground my teeth. Derek wasn't just bluffing with forged paper. He was already shopping the land. Jack lowered his voice. "Listen, I've seen scams before. This reeks. You need to get ahead of it before the county clerk thinks that deed is gospel." I handed him the envelope from my jacket. He studied the forged signature, whistled low. "Damn, whoever did this wasn't sloppy. They had help." That's what I asked him last night, I said. He wouldn't give up a name. Jack folded his arms. Then we find the name ourselves. You want me in? I nodded once. I can't fight ghosts alone. We stood in silence a moment, desert wind rattling the porch screen. Across the pasture, the for sale sign flapped against its stake, mocking me. Jack's jaw tightened. I'll ask around town, see who Derek's been meeting. Lawyers, bankers, anyone dumb enough to touch this mess. Careful, I warned. He's bold enough to forge deeds. Means he's desperate. Jack gave a half smile, the kind Marines reserve for bad odds. I've handled desperate men before. As he drove away, I glanced back at the pasture. Derek was out there now, walking the fence line with the same man in the suit, clipboard in hand. Derek looked up, caught me watching, and lifted his hand in a wave. Not friendly, but like a man already measuring what wasn't his. That evening I drove back from town after picking up feed. The sun had already dropped, leaving the desert cold and colorless. My headlights swept across the ranch gate and froze. A new lock hung there, shiny brass against weathered iron. My key slid in, refused to turn. I tried again, harder this time, until the metal bit into my palm. Derek had changed the damn lock on my gate. I sat in the truck for a long minute, listening to the engine tick down. Behind the fence, the house windows glowed warm with light. Shadows moved across curtains. Marlene setting the table, Derek pouring himself a drink. Like they belonged there and I didn't. Finally, I killed the engine, hauled the feed bags onto the porch and tried the front door. Same story, a new deadbolt. So I sat on the steps, cold seeping through my jeans, a sack of feed for company. I dug in my pocket, pulled out a ham sandwich wrapped in wax paper from the diner. It was meant for lunch tomorrow. I ate it now, each bite stiff and dry in my throat. Thanksgiving leftovers sat on my kitchen counter behind a locked door, but I chewed a day-old sandwich in the dark. That was the first time in years I felt old. Not just older than Derek, but bone-tired, hollow, worn down. A Marine doesn't admit defeat easily, but the sight of my porch light glowing while I sat outside like a trespasser cut deep. I thought of Linda, how she used to hum while sweeping this very porch, how she'd leave soup warming for me after long shifts. She would have hated seeing me shut out like this. The desert wind kicked up, carrying dust across the yard. I pulled my jacket tighter, eyes fixed on the glowing window where Derek moved through my kitchen. My kitchen. I clenched my fists until my nails dug crescents in my palms. They thought they'd erased me with a new lock and a forged signature. They thought an old man would slink away and let them enjoy the spoils. But sitting there alone, chewing a cold sandwich on my own porch steps, I felt something hard ignite under the humiliation. I wasn't beaten. I was waiting. And when the moment came, they'd learn I hadn't lost a damn thing yet. The next morning, the desert sky bled pink over the ridgeline, sharp and clear after a night of cold wind. I woke stiff from the truck seat, joints aching, mouth dry with the taste of dust. My ranch, the place I had bled and sweated for, stood 20 yards away, locked against me like I was some stranger. I needed warmth, so I rummaged in the garage. Linda's old boxes still sat stacked in the corner, untouched since she passed. I pulled one open, half looking for a blanket, half chasing a memory. Inside lay the little leather-bound notebook she used to keep. She wrote everything in that book: grocery lists, planting schedules, even her thoughts when chemo had left her too tired to talk. I thumbed through brittle pages until one line stopped me cold. This land is Frank's heart. We will never sell it. Not while I live, not after. Her handwriting curled strong across the page, steady and sure. I felt something shift inside me, like steel locking back into place. Linda's voice in ink, telling me what I already knew. This ranch wasn't just property. It was legacy. I sat there a long while, the garage quiet but for the scuff of mice in the rafters, notebook heavy in my hands. Humiliation from last night still burned, but it mixed now with something sharper, resolve. Derek had his forged deed, his new locks, his big grin at Thanksgiving dinner. But he didn't have this. He didn't have Linda's words. He didn't have the truth. I closed the notebook, slid it inside my jacket pocket, close to my chest. The Corps had taught me never to fight angry, but always to fight prepared. Well, I was done sulking. It was time to prepare. Out beyond the pasture, the for sale sign still flapped against the wind. Derek probably thought I'd slink into town, hire some half-rate lawyer or worse, do nothing. He thought an old Marine couldn't fight paper with paper. He was wrong. I looked across the yard and muttered to myself, game on. Jack came back that afternoon, his pickup spitting dust up the drive. He brought 2 thermoses of diner coffee and the kind of look men wear when they're about to roll into trouble willingly. We sat at the hood of my truck, boots in the gravel, steam rising from tin cups as the wind carried the smell of mesquite. "You still got that deed?" he asked. "Locked in my desk." He nodded. "Good. Don't touch it again. Chain of custody matters. If this goes to court, we need it clean. First thing we do is pull county records, see what's been filed. If Derek got that forgery into the clerk's office, we'll know." I sipped bitter coffee. And if it's already filed? Then we prove fraud. Start with the money. Any land transfer that big has to leave a trail. Bank wires, cashier's checks. If we can show no cash ever moved, the paper's worthless. I pulled Linda's notebook from my jacket and set it on the hood. Got more than memories in here. She wrote down every deposit, every withdrawal we ever made. If money left our account, it's in here. Jack flipped through a few pages, his brows lifting. Detailed. She could have run the Corps supply line better than half the officers we had. "Yeah," I said quietly. She kept us honest. Jack closed the book, tapping it like a weapon. Step 2, surveillance. Derek's too slick to operate solo. He's got a lawyer or a notary willing to risk prison. I've still got an old police buddy downtown. We'll lean on him to cross-check signatures. I leaned closer. And when Derek tries to push this at the family again? Jack smiled thin. That's when you let him. We want him cocky, overconfident, waving paper he thinks is ironclad. Then we cut him off at the knees. The plan sounded like the kind of operation I knew well. Scout, verify, bait, strike. My pulse steadied. I wasn't an old man begging for scraps anymore. I was a Marine about to run a mission. Jack raised his cup in a mock toast. "To justice, brother." I clinked mine against his, and to not letting a fool write history with my name. As Jack drove off, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from an unknown number. The voice on the other end made my blood run cold. The voicemail had been short, grainy, but the voice was clear enough. Derek telling someone, "Funds will clear by Monday. He doesn't know a thing." I saved the file, jaw set, then drove into town before sunrise. If Derek thought he had my money as well as my land, he'd miscalculated. First stop was the county clerk's office. The clerk, a woman who'd known me since Linda's church suppers, frowned as she typed. "There's a deed transfer logged last week. Signed by you, notarized by some lawyer out of Mesa. Says the ranch now belongs jointly to Derek and Marlene Mullins." "Can I get a copy?" I asked. She printed it, slid it across. My name scrawled in blue ink I'd never touched. County stamp, crisp as a badge. I tucked the paper into a folder, thanked her, and walked out with my pulse hammering. Next stop was the bank. I sat across from the branch manager, a man I'd known since he was a teller. "I need complete statements for the last 3 months," I said. "Transfers, withdrawals, cashier's checks, everything." He gave me a cautious look, but printed the stack. I carried it to a quiet corner table, spread the sheets like a battle map. Line after line of deposits from cattle sales and pensions. Not a single withdrawal matching the supposed land sale. No wire transfers, no cashier's checks. I flipped open Linda's old notebook, cross-checking every entry. Her neat handwriting matched every deposit, every bill paid. Nothing missing, no money ever moved. There it was, proof #1. A forged deed with no financial trail. Derek might have a notary willing to risk perjury, but he didn't have the ledger. He didn't have Linda's meticulous records. I slid the bank statements into a fresh folder, hands steady. The Corps had taught me that evidence is ammunition, and now I had my first full magazine loaded. As I stepped out of the bank, desert sunlight harsh on the sidewalk, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Derek this time, laughing into the receiver. "Old man still thinks paper matters. He'll learn soon enough." I smiled for the first time in weeks, because he was right. Paper did matter, and I was about to bury him in it. Sunday dinner used to be Linda's favorite tradition. Even after she passed, I kept it going. Pot roast, biscuits, her apple cobbler recipe scribbled on an index card. This time Marlene insisted on hosting, saying it would smooth things over. I went, not for peace, but because I knew Derek couldn't resist performing in front of an audience. The dining room buzzed with cousins and kids, football humming low on the TV. Derek waited until dessert was served before clearing his throat. He reached into his leather briefcase, yes, he'd brought a briefcase to family dinner, and laid a crisp document in the center of the table. "Just so everyone's clear," he announced, "the ranch is secured for Marlene and me. Dad's agreed it's time for fresh management." Forks clattered. My daughter's eyes widened. "Derek, not here." He cut her off, tapping the page. "It's official. Deeds notarized, county stamped. We'll be making improvements soon. Subdivisions, maybe vacation rentals, big plans." Relatives leaned in, murmuring. The paper looked legitimate. My name inked at the bottom, the county seal embossed. Derek's smile stretched wide as he soaked in their attention. I leaned back, folded my arms. "Big plans, huh?" Derek smirked at me. "You don't have to worry anymore, Frank. We'll take care of things. You can relax." I let the silence thicken. Let him believe. Then I reached into my jacket and set a manila folder beside his. "Funny thing," I said evenly. "I stopped by the bank this week. Checked the ledger. Know what I found?" His grin faltered a hair. "What's that supposed to prove?" "That no money ever moved. No transfer, no cashier's check. Which means your precious deed is nothing but paper. And in court, paper without a trail is as good as kindling." Marlene's hand flew to her mouth. A cousin whispered, "Is that true?" Derek laughed too loud. "Don't listen to him. Old man doesn't understand modern deals. We have everything we need." I leaned forward, voice low but carrying. "Then you won't mind when I bring it all to the sheriff tomorrow. Ledger, bank statements, Linda's records, every piece." The room went still. Derek's jaw tightened, but he forced a shrug. "Do what you want. Nobody's going to believe you." He pushed the deed closer across the table like a trophy, but his eyes flicked to my folder with something new in them. Fear. The voicemail hit my phone just after midnight. Derek's voice slurred with whiskey, but sharp enough to cut. "Listen, old man, you don't get it, do you? That land is mine. You push this any further, you won't just lose the ranch. You'll regret ever crossing me. Walk away while you still can." I replayed it twice, thumb hovering over delete. Then I smiled grim. Threats weren't weakness. They were evidence. I saved the file and slid the phone onto the nightstand. By morning, word had spread. Neighbors called, uneasy about survey stakes sprouting across my pasture. One asked if I'd really sold out. Shame heated my chest, but I kept my answers short. Not sold, stolen. Jack showed up with someone riding shotgun. Sergeant Alvarez from the sheriff's department. Young guy compared to us, late 40s maybe, but with the look of a man who'd wrestled his share of liars. Jack clapped my shoulder. Told him what's going on. He listened. Alvarez leaned against his cruiser. "Frank, I can't file charges without full proof. But that voicemail, that's intimidation. You hold on to it. And when you're ready, we'll stack it with everything else." He handed me his card. "You're not alone in this, understand?" I nodded, the weight in my chest easing a fraction. That afternoon, Derek strutted up my porch like he owned it, Marlene trailing behind, looking torn. He waved the deed in my face. "Last warning, Frank. Sign off peacefully, and maybe I'll let you stay in the house until spring." I laughed once, hard. "You already changed the locks, son. What else you gonna take? My boots?" His smirk slipped, eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this." Behind him, Alvarez stepped out of his cruiser. "Careful what you promise, Mr. Mullins. Regret has a way of showing up in court transcripts." Derek froze, color draining. He hadn't seen the deputy waiting. Marlene whispered his name, tugging his sleeve, but he yanked free and stormed off. I watched them drive away, dust boiling behind their SUV. My pulse steadied. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt the tide shift. Derek thought intimidation would break me, but all he'd done was hand me another piece of rope to hang him with. Jack called me 2 nights later. "Got a name," he said. "Harvey Denton, shady lawyer out of Mesa, known for notarizing things that shouldn't exist." We met outside a diner off the interstate, headlights from passing trucks sweeping across the cracked asphalt. Jack handed me a small digital recorder. "You'll handle the talking. I'll cover you if he spooks." Inside, Denton sat in a booth with greasy menus and a half-empty glass of bourbon. Mid-50s, thinning hair, suit too shiny. He looked like a man who'd pawned his conscience years ago. I slid into the seat across from him. "You notarized a deed transferring my ranch to Derek Mullins." His eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're—" I set the forged copy on the table. "Save it. We both know this signature isn't mine." He glanced around, lowered his voice. "Look, I was told you wanted the transfer quiet. Family arrangement. I don't ask questions." Jack leaned in from the next booth. "Wrong answer, counselor. Try again." Sweat broke across Denton's forehead. "All right, fine. Mullins paid me cash to notarize without you present. Said you'd signed earlier. I never saw you write a thing." The recorder in my jacket pocket captured every word. I pressed. "And you knew that was illegal?" He swallowed hard. "Yes." But he said, "Look, Mullins promised more business." I was desperate. I let the silence sit heavy until he squirmed. Then I stood. "Conversation's over." As Jack and I walked out, I tapped the recorder. "Proof number 2. Back at the truck, I played it back. Denton's shaky confession filling the night air. Fraud, bribery, felony forgery, all spoken in his own voice. Jack slapped the dashboard. That's the kill shot, Frank. Between the bank records, the deed, and this tape, he's finished. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders lighten. Derek thought he was clever, hiding behind paperwork and crooked lawyers. But now we had him cornered, and there was no way out. I stared across the desert highway and said, "Tomorrow, we bury him." The courthouse smelled of floor polish and stale air, the kind of place where lives turn on signatures and sentences. I walked in with Jack at my side, Alvarez carrying the evidence box. My boots echoed down the hallway, steady as a drumbeat. Derek sat at the defense table in a slick gray suit, smirk plastered on his face like armor. Beside him, Harvey Denton looked pale, sweat already dampening his collar. The judge called the case, State of Arizona versus Derek Mullins and Harvey Denton. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, words heavy enough to sink a man. The prosecutor started with the forged deed, projecting it on the screen. "Mr. Dalton, is this your signature?" I stepped to the stand, voice steady. "No, ma'am. I never signed that deed." She nodded. "And can you prove it?" I opened Linda's notebook, pages crisp under the lights. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every dime that came and went from our ranch account. No sale, no transfer, nothing. Then Alvarez slid the bank statements across, stamped and verified. Independent confirmation, no funds moved. The supposed sale was smoke. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Derek's smirk faltered. The prosecutor pressed play on the recorder. Denton's voice spilled out. "Mullins paid me cash to notarize without you present. I never saw you write a thing." Gasps from the gallery. Denton buried his face in his hands. The judge's gavel cracked. "Order!" The prosecutor turned to Derek. "Mr. Mullins, anything to add?" He shot to his feet, voice rising. "This is a setup. He's an old man clinging to dirt. None of this—" "Sit down," the judge barked. Derek's lawyer tugged his sleeve, but Derek yanked free, shouting, "That land is mine. Everyone knows Frank's too old to manage it." The jury stared, stone-faced. In that moment, the mask slipped. They saw him not as a son-in-law, but as a thief. The verdict came swift. Guilty on all counts. Denton disbarred. Derek let out in cuffs. He twisted once to glare at me. "You'll regret this, old man." I stood, spine straight, voice calm enough to carry. "No, son, you'll regret underestimating me." The bailiff pulled him away. As the courtroom emptied, Jack clapped my shoulder. "Mission accomplished, Gunny." For the first time since Linda passed, I felt peace. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't let anyone erase me. The winter wind carried the smell of mesquite smoke across the pasture as I sat on my porch, the same porch where Derek once waved like a man measuring what wasn't his. Now the locks were mine again, the deed restored in the county records, the land safe. Cattle moved slow through the fields, their silhouettes dark against the pale horizon. For the first time in months, I felt Linda's presence not as a wound, but as comfort. Neighbors stopped by with pies and firm handshakes. Word had spread, what Derek tried, how it ended. Nobody looked at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. Even Marlene came alone one afternoon, eyes rimmed red. She didn't defend her husband. She didn't have to. The silence between us said enough. I still eat most meals alone, but the food doesn't taste bitter anymore. Because when I unlock my own door at night, I know I fought, and I won. Not just for me, but for Linda's memory, for the soil my father turned with his bare hands, for every honest man who's ever been told he was too old to matter. The ranch is quiet, but it's mine. And in that silence, dignity feels louder than Derek's threats ever did. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Men U55 America, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.